What's up? Hi, happy to be here. I am indigenous, and when I tell people that, sometimes they're like, do you have a traditional like indigenous name like Crazy Horse or Sitting Bull or something like that? And I'm like, no, I don't. But if I did have one, it would be Chipotle bathroom code. That's what I'm giving. I am gay, and thank you. Was anybody on OkCupid like back in the day? Same. I had a weird, like when I first moved to New York City, I was on OkCupid like quite a bit, and I had like a lot of anxiety about like online dating, and I had a weird OkCupid strategy, which is that I would create a profile and then just like immediately kind of like be in my head about that, and then I would not like log in for like 4 months. And then eventually when I would try to log back in, I would forget my password. And I also forgot the password to the burner email account that I used to create the profile. So I would just end up making it an entirely different profile. And there was a point in my life where I did have 5 active profiles on OkCupid, and each one was much more vulnerable than the last one. Like when you make a profile, you're supposed to answer like fun, flirty questions about yourself. One of them is like, what's a typical Friday night for you? And the first profile I made for that question, I answered dancing. I'm fun, whatever. By the time I got to the 5th profile for that same question, I answered, honestly, thinking about my family's history of mental illness and alcoholism. ... Like dancing though. I ended up just getting an 87% match with one of my other profiles. So I'm dating myself, which is chill. I did like graduate to Grindr. I'm on Grindr now. Thank you. It's like, am I gonna die from a Grindr hookup? TBD, Grindr is dark, but like something I like about Grindr are the profile names, because like I feel like I've encountered like Grindr profile names that like have like 2 parts to them. Like the first part of the name is like something very personal about the guy, and then the second part is something exclusively about his dick. Like actual Grindr profile names I've seen are like recently sober, uncut. I've also seen like NYC transplant, 7 inches. My Grindr profile name is Native American, sponsored by Casper Mattress. I'm no longer like terrified of dying during a Grindr hookup though, like, cause that's kind of like he died doing what he loved. I'm more terrified of like dying picking up a bookshelf from somebody that I met on Craigslist. Like that's way more, that's just like more embarrassing, Mostly because there's nothing on Craigslist worth dying for. Like, I don't want people to know that, like, my final words were, the ad said this was new, but this is clearly gently used. In my, like, obituary, just say, like, he died from autoerotic asphyxiation, But I did recently do the whole, like, Dom sub thing recently. Thank you. I was the sub, obviously. Like anything to take the project coordinator aspect out of sex it's major. The Dom was wearing an Apple Watch the whole time. So anytime he like moved, it would light up, and I would check the weather. I could see like when he got a text, and like he was getting a lot of texts from somebody named Linda, and I was like, if you want to table this whole thing to call Linda back, I think she really needs to get in touch with you. And then at one point he did kind of just pause and was like, you sound like Michael Barbaro. like the host of the Daily podcast. And I was like, yeah, I understand the assignment is for me to get dominated, but for you to just like refer to me as a podcast host feels like a low blow. Sir. Cool. I am trying to take like better care of my mental health because I didn't really like get off on the right foot. I did do Molly twice within a month of getting vaccinated. And that is kind of like when you dine in at a fast food restaurant and you decide to go back for seconds. It's like, it sounds like a good idea, but it will have severe long-term health effects. If you've never done Molly, I like to think of it as like this feeling of like when you're running late for something, but then you get there only to find out you're actually early because you wrote down the wrong time. But the equal, like, opposite reaction to that is 36 hours later, your brain is depleted of serotonin and you feel like shit. And it was during the second Molly hangover that I had that I decided to watch the series finale of The Good Place. And if you haven't seen The Good Place, it's like a comedy about the afterlife, and it has a lot to do with like death and eternity, and I'm watching it like chemically incapable of experiencing joy. And I'm like, can we just like reboot Jackass? Like, I just want to watch somebody get kicked. You know, who consents to it? And then like shortly after I had that thought, I did see a trailer for the Jackass reboot. And I was like, wait, did I manifest that? And like, if so, how come I've only been able to manifest that? You know, why can't I manifest a therapist who's in network and taking new clients? That would be better. Okay, speaking of drugs, like the first time I did cocaine, I did it and then immediately like scurried home to Google the effects that cocaine has on you. And one of the effects is paranoia and unreasonable distrust of others. And as soon as I read that, I was like, have I been on cocaine my whole life?